6 million people are buried under the streets of Paris. You walk over them every time you cross the city. They are not 6 feet under in a cemetery with a headstone. They are stacked in walls. The walls of the dead stretch for miles through the darkness beneath the most beautiful city on earth. The entrance is a small green door on a quiet street in the 14th arrondissement. Above ground is cafes and bakeries and the sound of accordions. Below ground is the silence of 6 million skeletons. Paris is hollow. The city sits on top of 200 miles of abandoned limestone quarries. The Romans dug the first stone to build Lutetia. Medieval builders carved deeper for Notre Dame and the Louvre. For centuries, Paris built itself out of the ground beneath its own feet. By the 18th century, the tunnels stretched for miles in every direction. And the cemeteries were overflowing. The cemetery of the Innocents was the worst. It had been receiving bodies since the Merovingian kings ruled France. For nearly 1,000 years, the dead of Paris were carted to Les Innocents. The ground rose 10 feet above the surrounding streets from the sheer mass of bodies. The soil could no longer decompose human remains. Flesh would not rot in earth that was more bone than dirt. The smell carried for blocks. In 1780, a wall of the cemetery collapsed into a neighboring basement. Bodies spilled into the cellar of a house on the Rue de la Lingerie. The living could no longer ignore the dead. King Louis XVI ordered the cemetery closed, but the bodies had to go somewhere. Lieutenant General Alexandre Lenoir had an idea. 2 years earlier, Louis XVI had created the inspection of quarries. The quarries beneath Paris were collapsing under the weight of the city above. Engineers had mapped and reinforced hundreds of miles of tunnels. Lenoir proposed using the quarries as an ossuary. The bones of the dead would reinforce the city from below. The council approved the plan in 1785. The quarries were consecrated as the Paris Municipal Ossuary. The transfer of bones began the following April. The first bones came from Les Innocents. Workers went in at night with black cloth-covered carts. Priests walked alongside chanting the funeral rites. The carts wound through the dark streets of Paris before dawn. At the quarry entrance, the bones were lowered into the darkness by rope and pulley. The transfer continued for 15 months. When Les Innocents was empty, the work did not end. There were 17 more overflowing cemeteries across Paris. One by one, they were emptied into the ground beneath the ground. The transfer of the dead would continue for nearly a century. By 1860, more than 6 million skeletons had been moved into the quarries. The tunnels became a city of the dead beneath the city of the living. The bones were not dumped in piles. They were arranged. Skulls were stacked in rows, facing outward like a congregation watching you pass. Femurs and tibias were crossed in patterns like dark herringbone on the walls. Spines and ribs formed geometric borders between the larger bones. The walls of bones are not walls at all. They are architecture. They are the most elaborate tomb ever constructed by accident. The workers who built these arrangements were unknown. They descended into the darkness before dawn with lanterns and lime. They placed each bone with deliberate care. They wrote signs in French and Latin marking which cemetery each section came from. They carved the year of each transfer into stone plaques. They built altars and columns and arches out of the only material available. The bones of the dead became the mortar of the city. Above the entrance is a warning carved in stone, a rate. C'est ici l'Empire de la Mort. Stop, this is the Empire of the Dead. You pass beneath those words and descend a spiral staircase. 130 steps down. The temperature drops. The sound of the street above vanishes. The walls change from stone to bone. The first wall of skulls looms out of the darkness. Hundreds of empty eye sockets stare at you from floor to ceiling. The passage narrows between walls of stacked femurs. The bones are close enough to touch. Some visitors reach out and run their fingers over the ancient skulls, the skulls of plague victims, the skulls of revolutionaries who stormed the Bastille, the skulls of bakers and blacksmiths and mothers of 12 children, the skulls of people who walked the same streets you walked to get here. All anonymous, all equal in the empire of the dead. The bones continue for a mile through the public section of the catacombs, but that is barely a fraction of what exists below. The public section is one carefully curated kilometer of tunnels. The rest of the quarry network is vast and unmapped and illegal to enter. There are 300 kilometers of tunnels beneath Paris. Some are filled with bones that have never been seen by the public. Some are flooded with black water that has not reflected light in a century. Some contain World War II bunkers where the French resistance hid from the Gestapo. Some contain the secret headquarters of the German army during the occupation. Some contain the private chambers of the cataphiles. The cataphiles are the secret tribe of the Paris underground. They descend through hidden entrances in subway tunnels and sewer grates. They know the quarry network by heart. They have mapped tunnels that exist on no official document. They have built underground theaters and galleries and swimming pools. They hold concerts and dinner parties by candlelight among the bones. They are the ghosts who haunt the city of ghosts. The rest of Paris goes about its day above their heads. The waiters pour wine in sidewalk cafes. The lovers kiss on the Pont des Arts. The tourists photograph Notre Dame and the Eiffel Tower. 6 million skeletons lie directly beneath their feet. The weight of all those bones, the weight of all that history pressing upward through the limestone. Every foundation in Paris rests on the memory of the dead. The catacombs are not a tourist attraction. They are a mirror. They reflect the city back at itself. In the language of calcium and darkness, they ask you to consider what Paris is made of. Not just stone and light and the scene winding through the center, but bones, millions of bones. The dead outnumber the living in Paris by 3 to 1. 2 million people live in the city above. 6 million people rest in the city below. Every Parisian has 3 predecessors beneath the pavement. Their skeletons form the literal foundation of the modern city. The limestone that built Notre Dame was cut from these same quarries. The catacombs gave Paris its buildings and then received its dead. The city was built from below, and the dead returned to fill the void. The most famous visitor to the catacombs was not a tourist or a priest. It was a man named Philibert Aspert. He was a doorman at the Val-de-Grâce military hospital. In 1793, he descended into the quarries alone with a single candle. He was looking for the legendary wine cellar of the Carthusian monks. His candle went out. He wandered in absolute darkness through the tunnels for what must have felt like an eternity. His body was found 11 years later in a passage far from any known entrance. He was identified by the keys to the hospital, still in his pocket. He is buried in the catacombs where he died. His grave is a simple stone among the bones. The one man who went looking for wine and found the empire of the dead. The catacombs changed the way Paris thought about death. Before the ossuary, the dead were neighbors. They rested in the churchyard in the center of the village. You walked past your grandmother's grave on the way to buy bread. Death was integrated into the fabric of daily life. The catacombs made death abstract. 6 million skeletons do not feel like your grandmother. They feel like a fact of geology. They feel like the earth itself reminding you that you are temporary. The bones are not individual people anymore. They are texture, they are architecture. They are a statement about the relationship between a city and its history. Paris is the only city that built its dead into its walls. The catacombs are the only monument that is also a warning. You walk through the tunnel of bones for 30 minutes. The passages narrow and widen and narrow again. The skulls watch you with their empty gaze. The temperature stays constant at 14 degrees Celsius. The silence is the silence of 6 million people who have nothing left to say, and then you climb a spiral staircase back to the surface. The light hurts your eyes. The sound of the city rushes back like a wave, cars and voices, and the scent of fresh bread from a bakery on Avenue René Coty. You are standing on a normal street in Paris, as if nothing happened, but something did happen. You walked through the empire of the dead, and the empire let you leave. 6 million skeletons stayed behind. They are still there in the darkness under your feet. They will be there when the cafe you are walking toward closes for the night. They will be there when Notre Dame stands for another 800 years or falls tomorrow. They will be there when the city above is as silent as the city below. There are 6 million skeletons under Paris, and one day there will be 6,000,001, and then 6,000,002. The catacombs are not finished receiving the dead. The empire of the dead is always expanding. Arrête. C'est ici l'empire de la mort. Stop. This is the empire of the dead. The bones have been waiting for you.